To the Favisham Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group of Thursday, the 21st of January. We have a reasonable agenda this evening. Hopefully we'll get through it in the next couple of hours. Before we move into our agenda proper, I know we have some guests this evening. We have guests from Bolton and Dunkirk Parish Council, and do we have anyone else on the call that can either introduce themselves or not? There's no obligation to. You can just listen in if you wish. No, okay. So our guests from Bolton and Dunkirk, would you mind just introducing yourselves, please?
Yeah, I'm Paul Ray from Bolton Parish Council, which obviously adjoins Favisham. Just here to take notes and listen in.
Super, thank you.
Jeff Tutt from Dunkirk Parish Council and Bolton and Dunkirk Neighbourhood Plan.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, super, thank you. So what we do is customary for all our meetings.
Sorry, John. And Julian Owen is part of the Bolton and Dunkirk Neighbourhood Plan team.
Oh, hi, Julian. Welcome. I guess furiously punching digits, probably trying to make it work. It looks in that case like we don't have any members of the public. What we normally do is take any questions at the start. But thanks the three of you for joining. Before we get started into our agenda proper, I know one of the things that we discussed last time was actually the fact that we need to share more in terms of where we are with our neighbourhood plan. I just wondered whether you want to maybe start with any questions or just to give us a general update.
I've got nothing to say at the moment. Terry, who's normally with us at meetings, has done the neighbourhood plan or working with neighbourhood plan. So I'll have to refer to him, and perhaps I could drop you a line.
Yeah. You know, like I said, it's no big hurry. I think it would be useful. One of the things that we're going to talk a bit more about tonight are timelines. They're draft at the moment, but I think it would be useful for just to understand where both of us are at timeline-wise, and then we can take it from there. And in that case, we'll just crack on with our agenda. Adrian, have you heard back from Anthony at all?
No, and he's not in the waiting room.
All right. So I had a bit of a problem getting in. Hopefully Anthony can join us, but if not, I think we're all here. And really, for the benefit of our Bolton and Dunkirk colleagues, I think it might be worthwhile just sort of introducing ourselves. So my name is John Irwin. I'm a Favisham Town Councillor and chair of the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group. Adrian?
Hi.
Adrian?
Hi, I'm Adrian, Deputy Town Clerk at Favisham, providing administrative support for the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group.
Harold?
Am I on mute? Can't see myself.
No,
you're fine.
I'm Harold Goodwin. I'm chair of the Favisham site in the community rep on the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group.
Alison?
I'm Councillor Anthony Reynolds, Mayor of Favisham, and a great supporter of the neighbourhood plan, even if I don't have too many skills to offer it.
You're a member of the steering group.
Yeah.
Chris?
Chris Barker, Town Councillor for St Anne's Ward in Favisham, and a member of the working committee, really, I guess, on the neighbourhood plan.
And Hannah?
I'm Hannah Perkin. I'm councillor for Abbey Ward in Favisham. I am a Favisham Town and Swale Borough Council member. I sit as the Deputy Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing at Swale Borough Council, and I'm a member of the steering group.
Not least, Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff Wade. I'm a community member and vice chair of the steering group.
Okay. Yeah. And we normally have Anthony Hook, who's member of our steering group. As you know, or probably know, Anthony is the KCC member for Favisham, as well as a Favisham Town Councillor. So I think first up, hopefully Anthony can join us at some point during the meeting. is just to approve the minutes for the last meeting. I'll bring them up very quickly.
Councillor, if I could just, while you're doing that, there's a couple of elements on the minutes I'd like to sort of talk through if I can. I'm just going to pull it myself.
I've got them on my screen now, Chris, if you...
Great. So I think it was item 5. There's an item on the agenda around surveys. So I propose that I make any updates and comments there rather than responding to these minutes. And on timeline, as proposed, I'm going to present a timeline that we will have shared within the team and shared at the local engagement forum last week. And I'll talk through that and the kind of imminent meetings as well. And then, so I'll propose we accept those particular parts of the minutes. And I'm happy to propose the minutes as they are, and if anyone else wants to second.
Jeff, I think you're on mute.
No, Chris proposed the minutes. I was just putting my hand up to second if you needed it.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And if we can all vote to accept the minutes. Yeah, minutes accepted. Just one point I was going to bring up in a minute. So I think in terms of meeting with external representatives, that's on the agenda again this evening. Call for sites is on the agenda for this evening, so we'll update on it. The only thing that isn't on the agenda for this evening is around project management. The plan is to hopefully next week, we're going to have a meeting with Hannah Barter from Urban Vision, who have been supporting us on the plan. As you know, they've been supporting us on an ad hoc basis. So what we hope to do is when we connect with them next week, have a more detailed discussion on how they can best support us at this stage of the plan. So, you know, we're at a reasonably good stage. I think we've got a lot of feedback from our community volunteers around the actual policies themselves, but really we need someone to start pulling those together. So hopefully we'll pick up that project management element next week with Hannah. Okay, super. So that's the minutes. Sorry, bear with me a second. Next up on the agenda is update on discussion on the local plan. I've got nothing to share on this. Just to kind of kick us off. Obviously, I think it was actually relatively late in the day. If I recall, it was perhaps last Friday. We saw the sort of advanced draft of the Swell local plan. It's clearly not finished yet because there are things like web links and so on that they still had to add to it. My understanding was presented at the local plan panel on Tuesday and was approved. It then goes to cabinet, and then I think it goes to the whole council for approval, and then after that it obviously goes out to public consultation. Very briefly, I've read. Well, I'll start with a confession. I haven't read the whole thing. I started reading the bit specifically on Favisham. So it kind of consists of two things: generic policies which apply across the plan, and then there's a whole section which is which is specific to Favisham. So that this bit here, and what they've done is very helpfully published a plan of where the development is going to take place. My only comment of what I've read is I think it's very positive. I think there are a number of points in there that I'd like to see clarification on in terms of what they actually mean. There may be a few wording issues. So one, for instance, it talks of two things. First of all, it talks of the needs for the developers of those three sites to collaborate to build a single master plan. It then talks about the idea of them developing a design code, which they have to have approved prior to starting building or their reserve matters application. As you know, we're developing a design code, so I just need to understand with Swell how our design code will fit with any design code that the developers are going to have to do. My understanding is if our neighbourhood plan is approved prior to them applying for reserve matters, in our neighbourhood plan, we have a sentence along the lines of all developments are expected to comply with our design code. Then essentially they'll have to base their design code on ours. So that's just an example. There are a few things I think we just need to check. But overall, I was very heartened with it. I thought it was very positive. I think the time and effort we've put in working with Swell and talking with Swell is, I would like to think that we've influenced them. You never know, but I like to think we are. And I think it probably reflects the fact that the political makeup of Swell is very different and their outlook's quite different. But a lot of the things that we would have hoped to have seen in there, I think, are in there. So I think it's very positive. I don't know if anyone else would like to comment on it. Chris?
Yeah, I broadly share your view. There are a couple of things I think would be good to talk through with the team, and I'm not clear yet how we do that and how we have that conversation. I mean, it feels like we as a group have a good route through the local planning team, but not necessarily through to the local plan panel within the council. And I think it might be useful now that they have got that plan out and it is moved to consultation to see if we can actually get some face time with perhaps Councillor Baldock to kind of talk through some of the questions we might have. Broadly like you, I think it's very positive. A couple of questions which I think, you know, Hannah has kind of spoken to the various officers in Swale about the engagement with the health authorities on the assumptions around growth in the local health practices, which should be good to see, you know, some sort of manifestation of that in policy or documentation somewhere outside this probably. But yeah, I mean, it is positive that they are looking for the developers to coordinate, and therefore hopefully that will impact the kind of interdevelopment, you know, transport links and so on is very positive. So very welcome on the whole.
Thanks, Chris. Jeff?
Yeah, what I'd like to say is the general tone of it seems to be reflecting a lot of the issues that we've been discussing here. But I think with Ray and particularly Jeff and Julian and I have spoken before about maintaining the barriers between the settlements, and it talks about Ospringe and Orr, but it makes no reference to Bourton, to Selling, and we've already got around the junction at Graveney Road on the Thanet Way some little development coming in. We've got to try and watch that for the future, I think, so that we maintain the distinction of the settlements going forward. But I think there's some good positives there, John, and some of the things we've been talking around health, well-being provision and this kind of thing. There are generic phrases there that set the tone, the correct tone. But I think there are some details, as Chris was saying, of some questions that we may need to be getting added in as we go forward, particularly going through the section on the development management policies, which is a massive chunk of the plan. But I think the general tone of it is quite encouraging for the work we've put in.
Yeah, I agree, Jeff, and I think you know what it does is it provides a really useful framework for what we're trying to do, and I think it gives us sufficient space and room to add that level of detail where they're lacking. I think by necessity it's probably quite high level, but I was very pleased with talking about the Favisham sites particularly. Is the idea to make sure there is connectivity, to make sure they have a common look, feel through master planning. You know, a lot of those things are very positive. There's a lot in there about walking and cycling. There's also some stuff about sort of low car or car-free neighbourhoods, or elements of car-free neighbourhoods. So I think it gives us a really good canvas to work on. But you know, I do think we need to do the bit of work, which is to read through it in detail. It sounds like you're doing that, Jeff. And what I'd suggest is that what we do is, over the next week or so, individually, we read through it, and then we form a list of questions or clarifications or things that we want to see. You know, ideally, I think we could see if we could get some of these things done before the public consultation, but we might just have to put it into the public consultation, which is fine. But I think as long as we have a kind of common view what we do with it, but I think it's overall very positive. So, anyone else have any comments on the local plan? Just one final comment from me on it. Obviously, if members of the steering group could please provide their feedback, or, you know, there's no need to make it extensive. If you're happy with it, that's great. But if there are things you want to clarify, let us know. In terms of working with our volunteer group, our intention, it's actually already been sent to them for their attention. It's a huge document. So I sent them the web link rather than the document itself. But we're going to send it to them and ask for their feedback as well. You know, they're important participants in the process. So hopefully we'll get something from them. Okay. Next agenda item is update on surveys. Chris, can you lead that update, please?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. So the surveys, I don't unfortunately have a report, as I thought I might do by this time with the last steering group, because we've had quite a few last minute submissions and prompting really for resident survey feedback. But I think tomorrow is the day that all of the paper surveys go back to breakthrough communications, and we sort of close the doors on the digital survey. And so next week we'll start collating the input of those. So hopefully towards the end of next week we'll have some initial findings from that, which we will circulate amongst the steering group, and hopefully in time for some feedback at the town council at the beginning of February. The two other surveys we're doing are the business survey and the youth survey. I'm hoping that the business survey, or both the business survey and the youth survey, will be completed tonight. Adrian's put a lot of effort actually into all of the surveys, so I'd like to thank her for her contribution. Actually, it's been very, very important in making sure we've got it all done. But we've been running through the final questionnaires online and just checking their kind of suitability, that the logic flows and so on. And we expect that digital survey to be finished for the business survey tonight, and the youth survey is pretty much done. Brooke has done a helpful intro video to the youth survey, which is hopefully going to stimulate some responses. In terms of kind of methods of getting those out to the community, we had planned initially to try and drop paper copies of surveys with the schools, but with obviously with the COVID restrictions now, that isn't possible. But we will be promoting the youth surveys on the sort of standard social media channels and trying to drum up responses there. It may well be worth this if schools return in the next couple of weeks, consider what we can do around paper surveys too, but at the moment it isn't feasible. With the business surveys, we'll be promoting through LinkedIn, and again trying to target geographically through that. We've got email lists which Adrian's collated from various sources, primarily Kent County Council, and again we'll be targeting email addresses with those in the ME13, 7 and 8 postcodes. And last but not least, the Kent Federation of Small Businesses are going to send out the link to their known members in Favisham, and they're poised to do that tomorrow. assuming we sign off the survey tonight. Again, we're going to offer a 3-week window for completion and probably extend it slightly beyond that, and then collate the feedback from those shortly after that.
Okay.
Happy to take questions.
So Chris, obviously, you know, the big thing that's happened since the starting to put these surveys together is the land employment land allocations in the Swell draft plan. Is there anything that sits within that you think that will alter how we look at the survey results? So, for instance, I noticed that I think quite positively there was recognition that there needed to be office accommodation, for instance.
So we do ask, I mean, I guess in the resident survey, which has sort of gone and been and done now, I mean, we asked relevant questions about kind of green spaces and so on, which might be pertinent now. We've got a local plan, or might be able to kind of draw links between that and the local plan. For the business surveys, we ask them questions about whether they're kind of growing or contracting as a business, whether their current site has the right facilities, whether they would welcome a sort of science or innovation park, and what sort of capabilities or infrastructure they feel that might need. But didn't refer clearly to this local plan and the purple segments on that local plan, which talk about particular employment areas within those deliveries. Mm-hmm. Are you thinking that it'd be worth adjusting the survey to take that into account somehow?
Well, actually, having asked the question, I've been thinking about it a bit more. That would probably be a bit arse about face, to say, yeah. In particular. But I suspect there'll be stuff that will come out of the business survey, which we could probably use to help shape our response to the draft local plan. So, for instance, you know, if we think Sweller have underweighted it in a particular business sector and maybe overweighted warehousing and distribution, which seems to be a favourite in Kent, you know, maybe we could provide that feedback. So I think we could get some really useful information out in terms of what those needs are and whether those needs are reflected in the local plan, rather than shaping questions to what the local plan thinks.
It should shape the neighbourhood plan, which the developers should take into account as well when it comes around to building. Yeah. I think Harold wanted to ask a question as well.
I just wanted to say, I think one of the dangers with questionnaires and surveys is always to make them longer and longer, and there's a lot of evidence that reduces the completion of them. But the other thing, John, if there's time, is just to report that a piece of warehousing in Favisham is currently being repurposed as office accommodation, creating 100 new jobs in the town. And I think we need to remember that modern buildings can quite often be repurposed relatively easily. It was a warehouse employing very few people. It's being repurposed for 100 employees, which is great news for the town.
Yeah, very good.
Oh, that's really good news, Harold. That's what we need to see, and you know, it's good to see sort of volume employers coming in. You know, I think one of the things that personal irritation of me is employment's often used as an excuse for other things. You know, so say, well, we'll build a new supermarket because we're going to employ 20 people. You know, I don't think it's often, but we should be actually driving sort of high quality.
Yeah, just on that, John, Tesco's are currently reducing the working hours of a lot of their staff because of the impact of the new supermarket. Yeah. I mean, often it just moves employment around.
Yeah. Anna?
I was just wondering whether it would be worth in the survey having a question around how their business has changed due to COVID. So, for example, have they gone from being largely office-based to home-based, something like that, just in the kind of to reflect the change in landscape of stuff? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So I guess partly to answer that question and partly to come back on the local plan, actually, because it's some important information in the local plan as well. We do ask people about the size of their business and whether they're growing and expanding and where they're moving to and what they might want to do. I'm loath at the 11th hour to inject another question specifically around the pandemic, because I think there'll probably be answering in the context of the pandemic anyway. We do ask them whether the infrastructure they need now or in the future might be different. So I'm hopeful that we'll draw answers about how they think they will need to evolve. And on that, in the local plan, unless I've got this wrong and somebody else has read it, and I haven't read it all, but not disagree, my understanding is they're mandating actual fibre to the premises.
Yes.
Which is obviously considerably better than, you know, most of the fibre deliveries today, which is fibre to the green cabinet and then copper extensions thereafter, which are still, you know, 20, 30, 40 meg, but still not as high as 1 gig that you'll get. So the infrastructure to those developments look as though it's being mandated for a very high quality communications links at the very least, which is helpful.
Yeah, I think that's really positive. You know, I think we all, to Hannah's point, we all need to think about what employment actually looks like. You know, and I think obviously if you take a walk around here early evening, you see people beavering away in their cellars and in their front rooms.
Yeah. Actually, there's one other thing we do ask a question on, which is probably pertinent to Hannah as well, is, you know, we ask about the sorts of premises people need. One of the things I feel, and I think that I guess we'll hopefully try and draw out in the neighbourhood plan, is about the kind of, you know, the WeWork type facilities that used to be called Regus offices, those sort of things where you can go and work in kind of sort of joint office spaces and have joint meet me rooms and so on. Because I think, you know, COVID will have impacted a lot of people working from home, and I don't know about anyone else, but I'd really welcome a couple of days in an office, even if that's 3 miles away rather than 60 miles away.
Yeah.
And we could do with more premises around town that supports that kind of thing. So,
yeah.
But the survey will come out with what it comes out with.
No, I agree, and I think there's scope for that. You know, I know certainly within a local plan, the bit around McNaid's farm has been identified for mixed use, including office use. So, and I think some of those buildings will be retained. There's obviously a pair of oaths which are listed, but I think they're sort of non-heritage asset type buildings, and, which would really lend themselves to that. And I agree with you, Chris. It's kind of what they called serviced offices. I'd quite happily take on to escape. Super. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Adrian. It sounds like you've been doing a huge amount of work on that, and you know, Adrian, you get often in these meetings to taking notes, but it's important. The amount of work you're doing and recognized for it really makes a big difference. So thank you. Next on the agenda are timelines. Again, Chris is going to share those with us. What I would say is the timelines are still draft for a number of reasons. Biggest reason is once the plan is developed and draft, a lot of it goes out of our hands. So a lot of it then goes to things like statutory consultation. It goes into Swale Borough Council review and so on. So we need to get some clarification for Swale on what those timelines are likely to be. But I think it's still worth sharing because it's important, I think, that we can see where the end line is. So Chris, could you share that?
Just bear with me. Draw this up. I'm just going to make sure everyone can see that. I don't know if I do that, can people see the whole screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. I actually think everyone that was on this call was at the engagement forum last week, and so unfortunately the pattern doesn't change particularly very much, but there are a couple of things that we have queried with, as John had sort of alluded to, with Swale Borough Council's planning team, that we'll actually be discussing with them in detail tomorrow. But just on this, you know, there are a number of kind of community engagements that we've had. We also had some kind of earlier in 2020 as well that aren't covered on here. And obviously we've been sort of sending out the newsletter. Sorry, I'll go back a slide. If I can go back a slide, there you go. Which we've been sending out kind of quarterly and giving updates as well. but effectively, you know, as I'm sure even, you know, the Dunkirk and Bolton people on the call know, that a neighbourhood plan is driven by community engagement, and really it should reflect the wants and desires of the community. So hence the large amount of work we've done on surveys and in exhibitions. We are now beginning to pull draft policies together, based largely at the moment on the input of the exhibitions. But obviously, if there are any kind of major contradictions from the surveys or additions from the surveys, that will hopefully be reflected as the draft policies get formed across the rest of this quarter. And the other major action here is the call for sites. So this is within, you know, the parish boundaries of Favisham, directly related to the neighbourhood plan. And those that have had a chance to look at the local plan will know that it states that the neighbourhood plan will deliver 200 houses within the neighbourhood plan as part of the overall 3,500 expected to be delivered in and around Favisham. And just to report, I think that the call for sites is going extremely well, and we've had lots of interest, which is really positive, really positive. But I guess more of that as that process completes, really, which is due to do kind of in a couple of weeks' time. But, and this is the plan around its kind of, you know, formal submission and consultation. And as John said, there are a couple of things that we're querying with Swale at the moment. In previous engagements with the local planning team, it was sort of suggested that Favisham would undertake a consultation, which would be followed by a Swale consultation, and we just need to confirm that that's true. If it isn't true and it's just the one consultation that needs to happen through Swale, then we may well save an amount of time up here. Obviously, if Swale review our draft plan and provide a lot of comments, then we'll have to do this update process. But as we're keeping close to the planning team, and hopefully we will involve them in some of the drafts and reviews, that won't be too much of a shock. So hopefully we can potentially save some time up here. Obviously, we've got the Swale consultation and then the independent examination, which again we might have to respond to any comments made and redraft. And then the last area, which is a bit grey at the moment, is the referendum itself. So just understanding the process that we need to undertake for that. So how many days in advance have we got to prepare the question, got to notify, got to, you know, make sure we've got kind of electoral procedures and people in place and so on. So we'll be discussing that with the Swale team tomorrow to get a better understanding on that particular element of the plan. And I'm just going to go back a slide again, actually, as John said, but not on here. And we're going to be engaging Urban Vision. Sorry, I keep moving around, leave my mouse alone. We're going to be engaging Urban Vision to help us with the policy drafting shortly, and also the project management of its collation and coordination. And one of the areas that we probably need to consider, well, we need to consider in that is just how we incorporate what is the current local neighbourhood plan in the Creek plan into that neighbourhood plan. But we'll add that in as and when we understand how we'll undertake those engagements. And that is broadly it for me. Happy to take questions if there are any.
Nothing from me, Chris. Thank you. So, you know, I think the still remains ambitious, but I think the good news is, if I'm reading it correctly, is really by end of first half of this year, by June, we will have broken the back of it in terms of the actual writing of a plan. We'll have a draft plan. After that, it's around consultation and tweaking, hopefully, which I think is really good news, because it's been a huge amount of work for everyone, and I think seeing that there is a finish line is very good. So thanks for that, Chris. Any questions for Chris on timelines? Nope. Super. Okay, so next on the agenda is an update on interactions, external interactions with developers, essentially, and landowners. Before Christmas, we had 2 interactions with Dutchy, and we had another interaction with Kevin Atwood and his planning consultant. No further interactions with them to report, and none planned at the moment. What we did manage to do, though, towards the back end of the year, we managed to make contact with the owners of the other 2 sites, of the 4 volume sites. So firstly, we had a meeting with, this is site 18178. So 18178 essentially is Preston Fields. Preston Fields is a really interesting site in the sense that it was in the last local plan, and actually there's already outline planning permission for the vast swathe of that site. So it already has outline for 250 houses. What's happened within the neighbourhood plan, within the local plan, is it has been the site has been identified for an additional 70 houses, which extends it up towards the motorway. So we had a call with, let me just have a quick look at the names. Planning consultant, guy called Richard Barton, based for a company up in Manchester. We also had a representative of the owners, guy called Jonathan Elworthy. He implied that it's owned by a family concern, or certainly a group of family members. So it's in relative local ownership. I think some of the family at least are farmers, unsurprisingly, and landowners. One of the things they made clear during the meeting was that they're not developers. And so what they're doing is they own the site. So we had representation from the site owner. Then they have a planning consultant who's acting as the site promoter. So they will be selling the site on for development, for the physical development. What they have, we discussed their approach to that, whether they're going to go for 1 or 2 house builders. They're not wedded to either. Essentially, they said they, of course, would consider going with a couple of SME developers rather than large volume builder, but they're quite agnostic to it. I think it will depend very much on what sort of deal they get. One of the things which is we've heard rumored for some time, and they confirmed it, and of course it's been confirmed within the local plan draft now, is that they are going to put a road across the site. So that road will link Salters Lane to the Ashford Road. And I obviously not involved in it, but I suspect that the deal is they're providing the land for the road, and they have been given permission for well, I haven't been given permission yet, but they've been included an allocation for an additional 70 houses on the other side of that road, which goes across their site. They plan to apply for outline planning permission. I'm not quite, in my notes, I can't quite see when that's going to happen, but it's going to happen relatively soon. And they actually did agree to share that outline application with us. They haven't done that, by the way. So we can chase them up and see if they can do that. Obviously, the problem with outline applications, they show you very little. They kind of have a red line around it and a road going in and a road going out. But I think it would be useful all the same. Needless to say, they were nice people. Richard Barden, who's their planning consultant, he's obviously employed by the landowner. What he said is he hopes that he will be retained by the developer as their planning consultant, which would obviously be good for us in terms of having that continuity. And they also shared the outline of the existing 250 houses which have been approved. So yeah, quite a useful meeting, largely a meet and greet. No huge amount of detail yet, but I think it was a useful meeting all the same. Willing to meet with us again once they've submitted their outline application. Don't know if there's any questions on that for those of you who couldn't attend, or comments for those of you who did.
John, it might be worth just saying why that road is so important. It will take a significant amount of pressure off the A2, the Watling Street, by providing a route to the motorway from the west side of the Duchy development.
Yes, it's extremely welcome, and it will hopefully make a significant difference. The other thing as well is that there'll be certain walking routes through it, and they've indicated that they've already made commitments through the Section 106 agreements for footpaths around the site as well. So it's unusual, and it's a slightly more developed site in terms of the have outlined, but it was useful interaction, and I think that road will make a huge difference.
And I think the connectivity within that master plan to the Duchy site and out, and the junctions that we're going to have along the A2, it's starting to be a coherent sort of plan rather than fragmented, disjointed. We're getting the cohesion that we've been looking for some months now, years even.
Yeah, I think, and just to, I absolutely agree with you, Jeff, and just to kind of loop back on the local plan, I think some of the real positive stuff in there was around the need for speed reduction. And I think there's a strong recognition on that in terms of the actual housing estates themselves to adopt 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, but also for the Watling Street as well. I know it's been a major concern of ours, is how do we calm traffic along essentially what is a town street rather than a bypass road. And I think there's certainly some positive noises in the local plan around that. Okay, so the next meeting we had in January was with the planning consultant for 18135, which is the Graveney Road site. It's owned by the Prudential, so a large faceless organisation. So there was no representative from the landowner there, but we spoke with their planning consultant, a guy called Peter Aiken, who was nice guy, very, very cooperative with us. They're obviously the smallest of the 3 East Favisham sites. And I think that the message I took away from the meeting with him, and it probably reflects the fact that it's owned by Prudential, who don't really have any skin in the game from a Favisham perspective. He said, we will comply with anything which is in the local plan, and we will comply with anything which is in the neighbourhood plan, and we're not interested. So they've got no agenda beyond developing their own site. So they seem reasonably compliant. One thing that came up in that conversation, and that's worth noting because I know there's been speculation about it, and it's been represented a degree of concern. That site has the potential to enable access to, my mind's gone blank, Abbeyfields, the Abbeyfields site. So essentially they push up against the railway line, and with time, money and effort, it would be possible to develop some kind of a crossing over that railway line, which would enable the development of sites to the north. What they said to us, because we specifically asked them about that, and again, what he said is, from our discussions, it's not a thing that SBC want to see. Swell haven't asked us to do it. We're not interested in doing it, and the Swell don't want us to do it, and it's not indicated we won't do it. So, you know, anything can change. Clearly, I think they call it a ransom strip, don't they? So I think you know, anything can happen, but certainly from our first interaction, they're not minded to cooperate for the benefit of other landowners on the other side of that railway track. But we'll see. A couple of other things that came out of that meeting. Again, they said we're not developers. The site will be sold on. It's 250 units. They plan to submit the outline application within 6 months. So I think the picture I'm getting is it's quite possible that a lot of the outline applications will go in before the neighbourhood plan's ready, but the neighbourhood plan, fingers crossed, will be in place when it comes to reserved matters applications. And really it's the reserved matters applications that make the big difference. Harold?
I was just going to say, John, I think whilst they might have that aspiration, the way I read what the local plan is going to say about a joint agreed master plan across 3 sites is likely to delay outline planning permission going in, because I think there will be some it's it's pretty clear from things that have been said to us, there have already been some quite difficult conversations between the three developers of the different sites, and some of those issues are not going to easily go away.
Yeah, I agree, Harold. I actually, you know, and I commend the Swellborough Council planners for it. There's a lot being asked of the developers, quite rightly, and I agree, it's quite onerous. They've been asked to do a lot, and they've been asked to cooperate on a level which I think will shock some of them. You know, they're used to basically getting their site, getting it allocated, applying for planning permission, and doing their own thing. I think
It's not going to happen.
it's not going to happen. So I think that's really positive. So yes.
It's going to be fun to watch, actually, if I'm honest. I mean, you know, I look forward to it.
Yeah, great. So they're the two meetings we've had. Like, we don't have any more in the diary at the moment. In a sense, I'm not quite sure. I think once we've evolved our thinking around our policy areas a little more, it'll be time to re-engage with them. You know, at the moment, I don't think we've got much substance to engage them with. I think there's still a huge amount of benefit into it, because even at their outline, they'll be identifying the routeways, the pathways, and so on. So I think we can influence that. The other groups we haven't met with, and brings us on to our next topic, is call for sites. And undoubtedly through the call for sites process, we're going to have to meet with the owners stroke promoters of the sites that come forward. Adrian, can you sorry to put you on the spot here, but can you give us an idea of how many sites have come forward so far, bearing in mind we still have, I think, over a week until the call for sites closes?
I think I'm aware of about 10, but I think there's been a few more initial inquiries.
Right.
But I haven't been into the office for a week, so if anything's coming in paper form, I'm not sure of that.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'll kind of open it up to others to share their thoughts on this, but I think just for the record, it's been quite interesting, because I've seen some some personal correspondence actually that's come my way, which has been questioning the purpose and objective of doing a call for sites, and to kind of paraphrase along the lines of why are you looking for more sites when you've just taken 3,300? And I think it's important that we're all on the same page about why this is important, why we're doing it. I'll share my views, which are solely my views, and then maybe others could chime in if they want. Firstly, I think it presents an opportunity for us to see the appropriate development of parts of the town which can contribute to economic regeneration and the visitor economy. So I think there's definite benefits in terms of town centre regeneration. I also think it gives us an opportunity to develop some brownfield sites within the town, which are essentially sitting vacant and aren't greenfield, don't have any public amenity to them, but essentially are wasteland sites. And last but not least, from my perspective, one of the purposes of doing this, and a very important purpose of doing it, is to address the issue of windfall sites. As we know, there's a spectre of significant numbers of windfall hanging over the local plan. We know that the Favisham area is very economically viable for developers. It's very attractive for developers. And certainly I'm keen to make sure that we've explored and exhausted all the potential sites around Favisham, so we can rightly say at the end of this process that there's no further development sites available in Favisham. Chris, I think you wanted to add something. Chris, we can't hear you.
Sorry, John, on mute again. The two that really chime with me and that I absolutely endorse are the building on brownfield sites, and hopefully that works in tandem with the windfall sites, in that we don't end up feeling pressured to accept windfall sites and greenfield areas. One of the positives, I think, of the local plan, and it'd be interesting to see what our colleagues from Bolton and Dunkirk feel, but for us, given the challenging transport links of Watling Street and the Acma area and Ospringe, it felt really important to me, as it does for kind of, potentially the Abbey Field site, that we retain some greenfield boundaries between us and other settlement areas, and that we retain some semblance of, what the villages in Orr, villages are in Orr and Ospringe. And by us developing brownfield sites, I think we stand a significant chance in the borough, not this isn't just Favisham, but being able to resist more greenfield development. And I think that's incredibly important.
Thanks, Chris. Harold, did you want to?
Yeah, I guess I wanted just to say with my community land trust hat on that we're hopeful we'll be able to find some small pockets of land for some genuinely affordable housing, which will meet the very high levels of social need in the town. And the call for sites is very useful in that regard as well.
Yeah, thank you, Harold. And I know that a number of the sites which have come forward are already in public ownership, and certainly I would hope that when we have the interaction with Swell and KCC, who own sites within the town, that they would consider surrendering them at current use value rather than speculative land values, which is driving the price of housing in this country through the roof, which is a tragedy.
Yeah.
So call for sites, and if there's no other comments, it's still open.
Chris, John, Hannah's hand is up.
Oh, sorry, Hannah.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to add, I think one of the most interesting things that I've learned through the process when talking to the volunteers around environmental concerns is that sometimes a greenfield site in terms of biodiversity is not as rich as a brownfield site. So I think that was really interesting. And so we have the ability to actually be able to look at the biodiversity improvements that can be made with developing greenfield versus brownfield, just to look at that at slightly kind of more a smaller level.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. That's a really good point, and it's not something I was necessarily aware of or certainly thought about before I got involved in this process. I'd look at a field of corn and think, oh wow, that's great, it's a countryside, it's full of plants and animals, but of course it's not. Largely monocultures. I thought what was positive within the local plan is there is an expectation of a net biodiversity gain. I can't remember what the percentage was, but for these sites, which is real positive.
Yeah, John, can I just sort of add to that when we were talking about the Duchy site and so on, with the agriculture that there is there, the gain of biodiversity, if that moves away from agriculture, was presented as a positive gain. And I think what Hannah's just been saying is quite a surprising statistic when you think that you've got largely long swathes of open space, but they're controlled pesticides and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're coming in now with development with open spaces, new tree species and everything else introduced. I think there's an opportunity here that we don't want to miss, really.
Yeah, absolutely right. Jeff, and I don't think any single one of us on this group celebrates or wants to see the loss of good agricultural land. I think it's personally I wouldn't want to see any greenfield building, but it's a sad reality, and I think these kind of mitigations make the best of a situation that we probably don't want to see in any case.
John, I think we should just, perhaps an appropriate point to remind ourselves that when we had the exhibitions, people clearly understood that this problem is being generated in Whitehall and not in Swale. And I think that is a message that we need to continue to convey to people in Favisham. The problem is not of Swale's making; it is entirely really of central government's making.
I think that's a really valid point, Harold. Who wanted the housing targets that we've got in Swale or in Favisham? None of us wanted them. It's failed government policy. You're absolutely right.
Well, we did want more social housing for local people, but we didn't get that.
Yeah.
We happily accepted quite a lot of that, I suspect, but that's not what we were offered.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. So that's Call for Sites. It closes at the end of the month. One of the things that we will do is, sorry, just to kind of close that one off, we're working with ACOM, who are being funded through locality, which is great. And they're going to be doing the technical elements of site selection. And I'm really glad we've got this support, because the last thing I'd want to see is someone like me having to get involved in site selection. It's really important that it's objective, it's done professionally, and they will be doing that for us and working alongside us.
Just to be clear on that, John, there is always the risk that will be taken to judicial review, and at which point we definitely want ACOM to be speaking for us.
Exactly.
And not to be trying to do that ourselves.
Yeah. Super. Well, thank you. Last thing on the agenda, on a brighter note, and the last kind of happy news. We have been in the background while we've been doing this. We've had, actually, screen share with you. We've had one of our local young people has been beavering away for us, and actually, I think it was quite some time ago, we actually presented to you a few ideas around a logo for the Favisham neighbourhood plan. So that logo is now finished. I hope you can all see it on your screen. I think it's really pleasing. I think it's a really great professional job done by 14-year-olds at one of our local schools. So really the purpose this evening is just to get your formal agreement that you are happy for us to run with this logo. And just a little bit about it. I think it obviously captures the two main elements. It talks of homes and housing, but it also hopefully talks about some of the aspirations around greening of the town and the importance of open green spaces. So it tries to capture that. And I think he's done a splendid job.
It looks great.
So can I propose that we accept that as the logo for Favisham Neighbourhood Plan, in which case it'll go on our website and all documents that we produce hereafter.
I'm happy to second that, John.
I'm very happy with that, John. What are we going to do for the person who's done this? Because it seems to me that is an important part, not only for him, but for us and the town. We ought to be celebrating that in some way.
That's a really good question, and I'm glad you raised it, Harold. So we're going to give him a certificate and a modest a gift card.
Yeah, I was thinking more public recognition.
That's what I'm glad. Yeah, because we haven't thought about that. What?
I think at the very least, the mayor should make some kind of presentation and get a photo, and the same as we would for an adult. We ought to treat this.
Actually, one thing we can do very quickly is, if we get this to Claire Windridge, we could put it in the Favisham newsletter, and recognise him there. I know that probably won't have the photo, but I think you're right, Harold.
We'll do a photo the next month. It's this is just it's just a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
And good for his CV.
Yeah, very good for his CV. It's extraordinary for a 14-year-old.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, the reason he came to us.
Not your son, is it, John?
You know what? Actually, I think I can say this. He's in my son's class at school.
Oh, right. Good.
And I basically use it to tell my son, look, this is the sort of stuff you should be doing when I'm playing Xbox. You should be writing to the local council saying, I'd really like to do some graphic art for you. Can I get involved? And does he do it? No.
No.
It
does bring you a cup of tea, though, John.
That's very true. Very true. Okay. Super. So if we're all agreed, I think we'll have a think about that. We'll look at getting in the newsletter, and we'll also have a think about what else we could potentially do. I don't know if we could get it carried in the local press. Maybe we could give that.
It's also possible, John. I don't know if this the sort of things still goes on, but certainly when I was at school, that at the school assembly, that would have been presented, as it were, by the school. That's another way of doing it.
That's a good idea. That's a really good idea. Yeah, and the school could send it out.
Because it then acts as the kind of same kind of thing you're trying to do with your son. It works for the whole school if it's done that.
Yeah. Great idea. Okay, super. We'll consider it adopted then. I didn't hear any dissension. I think that's the end of our formal agenda. Is there any other business, any sort of questions, observations, anything anyone would like to share?
John, you mentioned comments back to you on the draft plan. Have you got a date in mind?
Well, it'd be good to get it ASAP, but I'm aware that everyone's busy. Would a week be reasonable? I suppose it's one of those things. If you leave it 2 weeks, you'll start it next week, right?
The other thing to say is it's not, in a way, Jeff, it's not time limited, is it? I mean,
No.
I think probably the sensible thing to say is whatever we get within a week, we could collectively use, but there's a long process of consultation
Oh, sure,
to go on. So it doesn't matter if you miss something. I mean, it's just a matter of getting the first hits in.
No.
Hannah?
Will we be doing a response to the consultation as a group?
I would suggest we do. I think it's important that we do.
I think it'll probably go to the standard planning committee rather than this group.
Just for the sake of transparency, it's clear the Favisham Society will also respond separately.
Yeah.
That's the Favisham Society.
I think you're right. Adrian, if it goes to the planning committee, we can always send our observations to the planning committee.
And it doesn't stop us as the steering group going directly to swear on it as well. I mean, I don't think that matters.
I think the council will probably...
They're not going to weigh the consultation responses at this stage.
Yeah, but no, I think it's very important. And Chris, you mentioned at the start about requesting a meeting with potentially Councillor Baldock. I think he's the chair of the LPP group. I think that would be useful. Maybe we could. I don't think we need to write yet, but maybe that's an action that we consider. Maybe at our next meeting once we've gathered the thoughts on it.
Is it something do you think we should bring up in our conversation with Jill and Aaron tomorrow, or we do that outside that?
I think, Chris, our advantage with Jill and Aaron tomorrow is that we can make a lot of progress without it raising any political profile. And the more we can just do on the straight technical level before we have to do it with councillors, the better, in my view. Because some of it will just slip through. Some of the things I want are just minor changes of wording that don't raise any big issues. And if they just slip through, so much the better. And then go for the political meeting later.
Happy with that approach.
Okay. Super. Thank you. Is there any kind of comments from our guests? Questions? No? Okay. Oh, Jeff?
Oh. To say thank you for inviting us this evening, John.
Jeff, you're more than welcome. We have these meetings once a month and you're more than welcome to attend them.
Yeah, I'd like to attend them again. It's very interesting, very formative.
Yeah. Okay. Super.
It's normally on the third Monday of the month, the meeting.
Third Monday.
Yeah, it was changed this month because we were expecting the local plan on the Tuesday, so we moved.
Which indeed is when they met. That was when the local plan was.
Yeah.
Keep us copied in, Adrian, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
To say that we also have a number of things to look at with the local plan. A lot of the bits in the local plan impinge upon Bolton and Dunkirk and our neighbourhood plan. And clearly the way it's looking that we may come into conflict over Brenley and the Duchy.
Yeah.
And also the extension to the east side of Favisham. But we need to discuss this with you, but we need to go away and look at it properly. We've only had the local plan review for a couple of days as well. But there's a lot of things in there that should have been consulted on perhaps before it came out to us all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you know, I don't think I think it's been done against pretty tight timelines, and I agree it could have been done differently. But
John, could I just ask Jeff a quick question if I could just indulge me? The Winterbourne proposal, Jeff, which I'm sure nobody wants to see, is that in your parish or is it in somebody else's?
It is.
It's yours. It's Dunkirk.
It's Dunkirk. Even though they didn't write to us, they wrote to Bolton, and it was only because the clerk at Bolton said, "Jeff, do you know anything about this?" and sent me some paperwork, we wouldn't have heard about it.
Right.
So they haven't started very well.
Well, we need to make sure we see that one off.
Indeed. I mean, there's a lot of antis against it. There's the 500 metres of extra buffer for environmental areas, which is half the site.
Yeah. Not to mention the bison.
Yeah.
And it was put forward for sites and it wasn't accepted. So
yeah, no, that's right. We just need to make sure we're all on the same page on that one.
Indeed.
Sure, we'll support you as much as we can on that.
And we will get back to you on all these different bits because, as I say, they are a number of them are really quite awkward. But if Julian wanted to add a little word, I'd appreciate it. If not, if he wants to keep his powder dry, happy with that as well.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. And what I'd say is Jeff, you know, if at another time, maybe our next meeting, we can put a formal bit within the agenda. If there's any particular discussion points you've got, just let me know. I think Julian's keeping his powder dry. Okay.
Just keeping his powder dry.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks.
At least he's smiling, John. That's all I can say.
Smiling assassin.
And
No.
that's the first. That's the first, Harold.
Well, thank you. Thanks everyone for dialing in. Speak soon.
Thank you very much. Good meeting. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.